So our PGCert is a master's level course, level 7, and it's for professional musicians, actors, production artists, dancers, basically anybody who teaches as part of their practice. And it might be your main employment, or it might be part of a portfolio career, and some of you have mentioned that. And it's a really unique opportunity, we feel, to develop the creative practice and reflective practice, creative and reflective approach to your teaching. That's the sort of heart of it. It's open to both Guildhall staff and non-Guildhall staff. We've got a range of different disciplines reflected on the course. There's people, quite a mix in terms of what stage of career people are at. So, we do have some people who are just starting out relatively on their teaching journey, some who've been teaching for quite a few years, and some who, have been teaching for 30, even 40 years, who we've had on the programme. The most important thing about who comes onto the course really is that you'd be somebody who is really willing to take a fresh look at what you do, to take a fresh look at your teaching practice. Each year we've got about 15 to 20 participants on the programme from this mix of backgrounds, and that mix is one of the real strengths of the programme, we feel. And you've got plenty of opportunity on the programme to exchange ideas, both with those who work in similar discipline to you and contexts, but also to gain new perspectives from people who work in other areas. The Guildhall staff who may be on the programme as students, so these are people who teach at Guildhall, but who are themselves coming to study on this programme for their own CPD. So we have some staff joining us from all the main divisions within Guildhall. So we have some people who teach in the music department of Guildhall, some people who teach in the drama department, and some people who teach in the production arts department. And we also have staff from other related areas of Guildhall. So GYA, Guildhall Young Artists, and that comprises Junior Guildhall and the regional centres for young musicians, Centre for Young Musicians, and the Islington Music Hub as well. This year, I think we've probably got about half the cohort, I would say, roughly, connected with Guildhall in one way or another through one of these. And the other half of the cohort don't teach at Guildhall, they teach elsewhere. Some of them may be from other higher education institutions, that could be other conservatoires or universities. We have people who teach for local music services, and we've got a particular relationship with East London Music Services. We always have some people from there. Got lots of people who teach in schools, right through from early years through to primary school, secondary school teaching. People who teach privately, in private practice, sometimes exclusively a private practice. And that private practice might be one-to-one teaching, or it might be group work, group teaching. And we have people that work with a range of different adult community groups as well. Again, sometimes privately, sometimes linked with institutions such as the City Lit. So that's to give you a sense of, some of the people who are on the PGCert themselves as students, who you would be studying alongside. The ethos of the PGCert. So the first thing is this: building practice and theory together. That's a really core part of what we try and do on the PGCert, to enable you to look at your practice, and we share theory with you, and for you to look at the connections between the two. Often the starting point is going to be your own experience and your expertise, and we enable you to grow your own skills as a reflective practitioner, and then to engage with the theory and the models to better make sense of your practice and to further develop it. Other times, the starting point will be the pedagogical ideas of other people and practice of other people. And, we'll share ideas both from very well-established ideas in literature, thinkers, together with some more cutting-edge ideas, including those that we develop at Guildhall right now, and enable you to find the connections between these ideas and your own practice. And through all of this, learning from each other, the exchange of ideas with others on the course that really provides such a rich context for the learning.
The course runs from September to June and is a fully online course, one academic year. It's a 60 credit course, which is sort of standard for 1/3 of a master's, and it equates to 600 nominal learning hours. So about 20% of that time is going to be spent in workshops learning. It comprises a series of live group workshops, which we run on Zoom, and these are generally held on Sundays. The day goes from about 10 till 5. The Sunday workshops are supplemented by other shorter online optional events. So we've got things like webinars, which we run, and we've also got things like study groups, and that's a really nice way to work with colleagues and support each other. And then a little bit about the PGCert core team. We come from a wide range of backgrounds, and I think it's useful just to know a little bit about the tutors. So we've got drama teachers who've worked as head of department, HE lecturers, have founded their own company based on well-being, arts and nature. We've got a music education trainer who's worked in, I actually think, just about every postgraduate course on music education. She's a trustee for Music Mark, school governor, PhD student. We've got a musician and composer who works collaboratively in dance and theatre, instrumental professors. One in particular also creates early year resources for musicianship, co-founder of a contemporary music ensemble, and a founder of a not-for-profit theatre company are sort of some of the things that our tutors engage in. So a really broad range. We operate a flipped classroom approach to the live Sunday sessions. So how that works is you'll get some reading to do in preparation ahead of the sessions, and then some follow-up tasks afterwards. And what this does is it means that the time we spend together on Sunday is really maximized for interaction, exchange of ideas, questioning, going deeper into topics, personalizing them. The live workshop sessions are supported by a huge range of online resources. So we use Moodle as our virtual learning environment, which is a platform that I really quite enjoy working with. So all of the live sessions are recorded, placed on Moodle, and along with any other resources, for example, slides that are made for workshops, readings, any other things that we've generated collaboratively in the session. So, there's all of that there just waiting to be revisited and enjoyed. As well as that, Moodle is the home to webinars from previous years. So when we've had visiting lecturers coming in, they'll run a webinar for us and we keep that available to you. So there's a huge range of resources that you can go further into, as well as what you're going to be getting on the course. We're also quite pleased to have all of our readings that you actually need to complete the course kept on Moodle. So they're all there at the click of a button. You get the PDF and it's there for you. And we've got a really nice group of past student assessments. So as well as getting the assessment information for your own work, you'll be able to watch examples of previous students' works. So, really useful for learning from peers. Well, not just the peers that you're going to have on the course, but also ones that successfully completed it in previous years. You can kind of look back on their work. The one-to-one tutoring, most often it's through supporting you by looking at draft material or preparing for assignments, but they can also observe your teaching and give you feedback on that. So this is a really great close relationship that you can build up with someone, and they really get to know your teaching practice. So just sort of reminding that it is a part-time online course. This gives you lots of flexibility in terms of fitting it around your existing work. The Sunday sessions are the only absolute required time for you to be available. These are the core workshop times, and we publish the dates for these sessions over the next few months. So you'll have those long in advance. The optional sessions that we've mentioned, the sort of webinars, happen in the evenings. And as I said, you can catch up on those via the recordings. So you can really do everything from home where you're comfortable, or even on the go as well. Can be a useful time to watch webinars and things like that. The one-to-one support is generally Zoom, phone calls, or email. It's not prescriptive. You and your mentor will work out what works for you guys, what sort of dates, frequencies, when you need to check in, that sort of thing. It's an online course, but you have full-time access to the support services at Guildhall. So things like student affairs, which can help with study skills support or with counselling, the IT department, and also the library. So we just need to flag that this is online support, not actually going into the building. Because it's an online course, you're not issued with a student card and you don't have the physical access to the building, but the registry can provide letters of proof for student status and things like that if needed for discounts. But also just to be aware that some of those discounts only apply to full-time students, and this is a part-time course. I'd like to also just talk about some of the pros for being online. So flexibility, rewatching material, being able to fit around professional and family life. You can attend from anywhere. We had someone who had to rush to New Zealand a couple of years ago. He managed to complete the course from there. Odd hours, but he did it. You also get to be involved in this diverse and wide-ranging network, both of tutors and peers. Some students choose to meet up in person, but you don't have to do that. You have the latest research at your fingertips, which I find really exciting. Via the library, you get what is called an Open Athens account, which gives you access to a vast amount of journals on the performing arts, on teaching in the performing arts. And I suppose just one example of how well this course runs online is that I haven't actually been to Guildhall for close on 2 years for work purposes. So it was quite a shock when I worked that out. But equally, it means we're doing a good job at providing everything that you need. So I just wanted to give you a little flavor of what these online things look like. So this is a funny picture of a workshop that we were working with this year's students. This is focusing on self-assessment and how that can support our teaching. And I'm just going to share with you some lovely feedback that we receive. Modeling best practice, we ask you to collect feedback from your students, but we also collect feedback from you guys. So we've been told the team creates a sense of online community that's worked really well. There were lots of classes about facilitation and structures, and this was also reflected in the teaching itself. Such a high level of teaching, especially online. So we do have fun. This is a little picture of a slideshow during a webinar and a little bit of a testimonial from a current student. A highlight of the course for me has been the one-to-one sessions with my personal tutor, who has supported and coached me through the assessments and course readings. In 20 years of teaching, I haven't had the opportunity to have my own teaching observed in such a rigorous and motivating way. Just to give you a little sense, I mentioned earlier that we sometimes put up resources that we've created in a session on Moodle. So here are 2 examples of those resources. So, we're not just sort of sitting online lecturing to you, but we make these sessions very interactive. So the sort of one with the cork background there is a Padlet at the end of a session on reflective practice, where we invited students to kind of note down some of their takeaways. And the smaller inset box was also from the self-assessment tools workshop. So another quote from students: "Meanwhile, wanted to thank you for all this year of learning. It will continue to burn on my brain. I found the course to be such a source of support and deep inspiration, and you are a genuine guide and steer of a fantastic team of humans. Makes me proud to be a teacher." So that's some of the things that we love about our work and about this course.
So much of the content on the PGCert it's very holistic, and you'll find lots of overlaps between the different areas that we cover. But I want to give you some idea of what you're likely to cover during the year. Building effective learning environments and approaches to student support, issues around inclusion, participation, working with groups, and that's both groups of students and also with your colleagues, different approaches to facilitation and running sessions, looking at theories and models around learning and around motivation, issues around designing learning, such as considering aims and outcomes, learning activity and assessment activity, giving and receiving feedback, and lots of things around assessment, both formal and informal assessment, Developing your reflective practice and the reflective practice of your own students. Looking at your fundamental values and your principles in education. Looking at ways of evaluating your teaching, including getting feedback from your students and having your teaching observed. And issues of professionalism, boundaries, and links to the wider work as a practitioner. So that's a sort of overview for some of the core areas of content that we look at. But as I say, it is very holistic, and you'll find that many of the individual workshop sessions will touch on several of these areas at a time.
So I just want to unpack reflective practice a little bit with you, why it's such a big part of the course, what makes it important, and how it might benefit you and your students. Reflective practice is a really core concept within any sort of professional development. And to understand it, we can maybe start with looking at some learning theories. So, for example, what is learning and how does it happen? In the 1980s, Kolb suggested that learning is the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. About 3 years later, Peter Jarvis bounced off this and said that learning is the transformation of experience into knowledge, skills, and attitudes. But the question remains, how do you transform experience? How do you choose which experiences to transform? What's there to learn from the choices you make? What do you do when your experiences bring you to research and theories that seem to offer opposing results and advice? How do you decide in those instances? And that's where reflective practice is so important. It recognizes your context and your student knowledge, and it seeks to provide a way for you to evaluate theories and research and creatively apply these to your unique situation, so you can achieve the outcomes that you want to see for your students. So it's very, very situational. So your reflective practice can be research informed. It can be something you read and want to find more about. It could be prompted by group discussion during a workshop. So that's why we put a lot of time and emphasis on that aspect of the course. It could be through becoming aware of practices of colleagues. And again, it's quite interesting to work with lots of different disciplines because you get that richness of different possibilities that you could use. And it could also be something you engage in because you spot an area within your own practice that you think, actually, I want to know more about that, or I'm curious to see what more I can achieve there. So ultimately, reflective practice is a very empowering process. It enables long-term professional development. So, and not just your professional development in the time that you're with us, but a skill that you'll continue to use to transform your teaching throughout your career. So I've got a couple of quotes for you here on some people who try to explain reflective practice. So when we put reflective practice into effect, we're actually seeking to make a change by using subjective and objective data from experience to plan and decide actions. And then the other one, we can use reflective practice for our own development and to help others. So really tied into what you are going to get out of the course, but also to what you can offer your students as a result of it.
The assessments on the programme, they're really linked very closely to the overarching aims and core content. There's a mix of live assessment, written work, observation and feedback. So for example, you'll do a short individual presentation on your core principles and values in education. You'll run a short group workshop followed by a presentation where you'll be unpacking the rationale for the workshop, its design, linking to theory around working with groups and so on. You'll do a series of case studies on your own teaching practice, and each of these case studies has got a different focus. So for example, a particular teaching technique which you use, your approaches to feedback or assessment, your approach to lesson design, and a case study on your approach to developing effective learning environments. Each of these case studies links to a wider critical reflection on your practice. So there's a process of sort of zooming in quite a bit of detail on an area and then zooming out and kind of contextualizing that within the overarching view of your practice. And these main elements are supported by observations of other people's teaching. And we talked about how important it is to get ideas and share ideas. It'll be supported by observations of your own teaching. You'll get some feedback on your teaching and you'll reflect on that feedback, and you'll develop action plans in response to the feedback that you receive on your teaching. You'll also gather feedback from your own students. You'll demonstrate how you do that. We spent a while looking at different ways of doing that, but also, you'll demonstrate how you process that feedback, how you roll that back into your own teaching work. And you'll also be offering up examples of your own planning of your teaching. So that gives you a flavour of some of the assessed elements. And as I say, they're very, very bound up with the core aims, what we're hoping that you're going to be able to learn on the course. There are technically two pathways on the PGCert, and you choose one of these at the point of application. The PGCert (HE), which stands for higher education, that's available for people who are already teaching in higher education. So, for example, those Guildhall staff who choose to put their student hat on and come and do our program as students. And to qualify for that particular pathway, you need to be doing at least 50 hours of HE teaching work whilst you're on the course. You'll just be eligible for that pathway. In practice, both of these two pathways, the main PGCert 1 and the PGCert HE, the content is very, very similar. And the cohort go through the majority of workshops all together as one single cohort. There are just a handful of sessions later in the year where we split by pathway. For example, the PGCert HE cohort will have a few sessions that focus on HE specific issues such as assessment or curriculum design within higher education settings, whilst the main PGCert cohort have sessions that are more tailored to other teaching settings such as schools or adult community work. But either way, you've got access to the materials for both pathways, regardless of which one you're on. So, for example, if you want to watch the video of a workshop session from the other pathway, then you can absolutely do that. The other main difference is the PGCert HE pathway. It's additionally accredited by Advanced HE, which leads to Fellowship of the Higher Education Academy. So in addition to your master's level PGCert, which everybody will get, you'll also have Fellowship of the HEA attached. However, if you don't currently teach in higher education, but you are interested in doing so in the future, then the PGCert is a great stepping stone into doing that kind of work. There are also technically two options in terms of the time frame that you do the course over. Now, most people do the course in 1 year. It's part-time, as we described earlier, 60 credits, nominally 600 hours of learning, part-time over 1 year. However, there is an option to do the course over 2 years instead. And the way this works is that you do module 1 in the first year, which comprises about 2/3 of the overall work. And that runs from September to March. And then you effectively take a break from the course for the best part of a year, and you pick up with module 2 in the second year, which will be roughly from March to June. You still retain full access to the online material during this time, so you can take the opportunity to extend your reading or get ahead with some of the work from module 2 during that long gap. You're also welcome to join any other webinar sessions during that time and to stay in touch with your one-to-one tutor. Might be a suitable option if you know that you've got a very big commitment during the summer term period of that first year, for example. But if that isn't the case, then we would generally recommend that people go through and continue and do the course in the 1 year. I just want to signpost some differences between a PGCert course such as ours and a PGCE course as well, because this is a question which crops up a lot and it's kind of relevant to clarify. So PGCE stands for Postgraduate Certificate of Education, PGCert stands for Postgraduate Certificate, and then it's usually followed by something else, in our case, Performance Teaching. Just to go over a few of the differences here. So PGCE, it's the context within which that occurs is generally teaching the national curriculum in schools. Context for PGCert studies, on the other hand, is much broader. So that's relevant for everything from teaching early years through adults, one-to-ones, and so on. The discipline is also relevant to bear in mind. So generally, not exclusively, but generally, when you study on a PGCE course, you'll be on a single discipline program, often quite a specialized single discipline program, you'll be going through as a single discipline cohort together, as opposed to PGCert. In our case, it's a multidiscipline cohort. As you've seen, you'll be alongside music teachers, drama teachers, production arts teachers, dance teachers. There's usually a difference in terms of the pattern of the course. PGCEs are usually full-time, although you will come across some part-time versions, but the most common version is a full-time one, which will include a substantial placement in a school, usually something like 120 days where you're in a school shadowing. Whereas PGCerts are usually much more part-time. In our case, it's 600 nominal learning hours, of which about 13 days is face-to-face live workshops on Zoom and other online activity and so on. Who's it for? Well, again, this is broad generalizations, but often PGCE is a very useful way into teaching if you've never done any teaching before, and especially if you know that you want to teach in schools, you want to teach the national curriculum. So to that extent, sort of early career. And also, if you're not already working full-time, for example, and you don't want to continue to work full-time, whereas the part-time PGCert option is very useful for people who are currently working, perhaps full-time, maybe as teachers, performers, and want to continue to do the bulk of what they do and just fit this study in alongside everything else that they do. There's a price difference. PGCE usually roughly 9,000, especially because it's a full-time course, there's more overall contact hours there. PGCert, so if you do the course over 1 year, that's the price. If you split it and spread it over 2 years, it's a little bit more because you have a longer period of access to the materials and support. And the final difference here is this thing called QTS, which stands for Qualified Teacher Status. So to teach the national curriculum in classroom settings in schools, you need to have what's called Qualified Teacher Status. So if that is where you're aiming for, then you need to do a PGCE instead of the PGCert course. However, if you teach in other settings, then a PGCert may well be more relevant for you. And it's also worth noting that there's no exact equivalent of a PGCE qualification or QTS when it comes to teaching in other settings. For example, in higher education, there's no equivalent of QTS in the PGCE. However, it's likely that in the near future, teachers in HE settings will require some kind of formal teaching qualification. And this will also be kind of the edge when it comes to competing with those who don't have such a teaching qualification. And more, we're finding that higher education institutions, certainly when they're recruiting new staff, that's one of the things that they're looking for. Does this person have any actual training in how to teach? It's a bit of a shift from how things were in the past. Think a little bit about what people go on to do after the PGCert. So, for example, some people, one person has gone on to become lead lighting lecturer at Lambda. Another person sort of founded their Screen Actors Development Lab, which is, doing very well at the moment. Someone else went on to become head of strings at Wickham Abbey School. Someone else has gone on to become a mentor in one of the Guildhall coaching programs. Another person has gone on to be another head of strings, this time head of string faculty and chamber music lead in a school in China. Other people have gone on to further study, masters and doctorates. Bobby, you could say a little bit about your journey as well.
Well, I first met Carlos on an evening like this. And I absolutely loved my experience on the PGCert, and so I didn't leave, and I've managed to continue as a tutor and mentor on the course. So that was 2018 to 2019, I think, were my years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And adding to that, we've also had graduates who've been appointed heads of instrumental and vocal studies at a music service, and also another who was employed by Guildhall Young Artists to deliver specialist training workshops to music teachers sort of all over the country. So it really does open up a lot of opportunities, certainly in my experience.
Thank you, Bobby. So these continuing within their current context as well. I mean, that's a very common experience, simply just deepening what you do within your existing context, even if you don't change that context. And then further studies, sometimes doctorate. Other people have gone on to engage with our internal coaching mentoring program, and we've had several people, ex-students from the PGCert, come back to deliver sort of one-off workshops or webinars in their area of specialism as well, and that's all part of that overall community of practice that I referred to earlier. There's also a non-standard entry option. So technically, for a postgrad course like this, as a minimum requirement, you need to already have a first degree, an undergraduate degree. But if you don't already have an undergraduate degree, that's not necessarily a barrier to entry. And often, kind of equivalent professional experience and so on will do the job as well. Essentially just get in touch with us, have the conversation with us, and then if we think it's appropriate to put you through via the non-standard entry option, then we'll basically just ask you to do a couple of other tasks instead, and perhaps also providing a professional CV and so on. So some things which would stand in lieu of an undergrad degree. Once you go through, you'll get to various flip down menus. You choose this one here, which says research and teaching. And then on the next page, there's a flip down. And again, this is where you choose your pathway. So again, if you're not sure, for example, you might be in the position of having roughly the right amount of hours in HE teaching work to qualify for the HE pathway, but you're not sure and you want to check it out, again, just drop us a line. But otherwise, this is where you'll select it. And then again, you get through to another one where you select 1 year or 2 year.